Hey everyone, and welcome to Recharge the Podcast. I'm David Coe. This is part two of my conversation with John Driscoll. If you haven't had a chance to go back and listen to part one, please go do so because it was just so insightful. So let's recharge with John Driscoll, part two. You have a lot of books behind you, and one of them is your own. Uh, and that was Pay the People. I think it's kind of behind your shoulder, right there.
So
Yes.
there's yeah, and then we got another.
There it is. There it is. Right up top. So I love that. And the book's about like why fair pay is good for business and great for America. Just love that. So since you've written the book, what have you seen and learned since your experience at CareCentrix that led to this book?
I think the thing that's important about the book, David, is for me it's obvious, and yet it really isn't obvious to many companies and corporations around America. There is a very high cost to low wages. It adds to higher turnover. That means people starting a job, stopping a job, going to the next job. It leads to an enormous amount of stress for the average employee. And it's actually counter productivity
Mm,
because if you're super stressed, if you're going to switch jobs, if you're struggling to think about all the other bills that you have to pay, you're not going to be focused at work. But I thought it was really important to write the book to get that message out there and to show examples of this. But it's not like it's easy from a market perspective. When Walmart started to move up from a $7.25 wage to 10 to 14, they were very clear they're going to put $2.7 billion into their employee front lines, and their stock got hammered.
mm,
And the short-term Wall Street business type analyst just doesn't get it. So I thought it was super important to get our message and that message out there. But the more I dug, David, the more I realized that some of the best and most successful businesses in America are already there, and yet the
mm,
majority are not. There still is an illusion that the market is going to somehow adjust
mm,
and that businesses will pay a living wage. I mean, if you look at the median state and the median wage in the US, it's a state like North Carolina.
mm.
And a living wage in North Carolina is close to $27 an hour. In Jackson, Mississippi, it's probably closer to 12 to 14, and in LA, it's probably closer to 35. The cost of living has continued to kind of march forward, but that commitment to pay a fair and living wage has not. And so I think that two things. One, the more I dug with some of the best companies in America, the more I realized how effective it was, and many of the companies had invested in the front line, like a Walmart or a JP Morgan. And yet, the more broadly I looked, the rarer I found that commitment to really pay frontline employees, entry level employees, um, a fair and living wage, and and particularly at a time of where housing prices have gone up 50% since 2020.
Mm.
Energy costs are up 30% over the last few years. Food costs, while they've mitigated a little bit since the post-pandemic levels, beef is way up. Gas may be down, but everything else is sort of up and to the right in terms of cost. It's an even bigger burden for entry-level workers. And I worry about the effect on society in general.
Mm. Do you think those short-term analysts, you said they didn't, some of them don't get it. What's it going to take for them to get it?
Well, I'm a big believer in raising the minimum wage, and there's a number of different ways to do it, to vary it regionally. I think we should be requiring a living wage and probably putting an excise tax on those companies that don't pay a living wage. That'd be the simplest way to get there because the market's failing. And what even my conservative friends don't always realize, those who really believe that the market will adjust, they're not calculating the cost of Medicaid, healthcare. A substantial minority of the people on Medicaid, the healthcare that the state and the feds pay for the poor, they're all working.
Mm,
There are tens of millions of folks who are working and on Medicaid because they don't earn enough. They're on food stamps. They are often in Section 8 or subsidized housing. So effectively, as taxpayers, we are subsidizing low wage workers who are really struggling to make ends meet. And the other thing that I don't think we calculate in there is the amount of stress that that puts on young families in America. 40% of all babies in America today are born on Medicaid. They're born into poor families. If those poor families don't have enough time to invest in their kids, and those families, the parents are working, 2 to 3 jobs, in some cases adding two part-time jobs to a full-time job. I don't think that's good for those families. It's not great for the taxpayers, and it's not fair to those workers.
Yeah, and speaking of mental health, just as you go down that angle, because there's an angle of that that permeates kind of like throughout your book. And you've got a number of quotes in there. We just talked about some of that, but a lot of it deals with financial stress, as we've talked about, and that affects how they may show up at work. Do you have something that can help us think about how that affects our employees at work, that financial stress, so their ability to show up?
I mean, look at the trend lines in terms of drug abuse, alcohol abuse, depression,
Mm.
suicidal ideation, the epidemic of loneliness. Well, how can you're definitely going to be lonely if you're working 50 to 60 hours a week. You have no time to spend with friends and family. All you have to do is look at the trend lines. The problem with putting a number on the burden of mental health is it only breaks the surface of awareness when there's a crisis.
Yeah.
But there's a lot going on under the surface, and you see it in the trend lines of people who are more and more aggrieved, um, more and more depressed. And I think a lot of that pressure, at least for poor and working class, the working poor, comes down to a sense of the resentment and unfairness that I'm working really hard and I'm going backwards or
Mm.
nowhere. I mean, the great American dream is that you can work hard, play by the rules, and get ahead and provide that your children will have a better future than yours. This is the first generation where that's not the case.
Mm.
30 years ago, 70% of children would live better lives, make more money, and live more richly, at least financially, than their parents. In this generation, that's not true. It's hard for me not to believe that the elimination of increases in minimum wage 20 or 30 years ago, between 1932 and 1980, productivity, the American worker went up by over 100%.
Mm.
But wages kind of tracked the average worker, up around about 90%. Since 1980, American workers' productivity has grown by just under 100%. It's closer to, I think, 89 or 95%. Average wages have gone up, I think, low double digits.
Mm.
And when you have a working class that's working harder and going backwards, I've got to think that has a big impact on grievance, resentment, despair. It's the essence of despair, working harder and going backwards. And we can solve that by investing in paying people fair wages and making the promise of America um, a fair one and a realistic. My grandparents were relatively poor Irish immigrants. My grandfather was a janitor. My grandmother was a nanny. They came over here when they were teenagers, and my dad was the first person to go to college in our family, and he went there on a football scholarship. And I got the chance I've got to have two graduate degrees, and both my brothers went to graduate school. And that's the kind of, certainly had a certain amount of luck, uh, but the system was set up to give people chances because you could have a working class job and pay your bills. And now that's often not the case. And I don't think that's a system that leads to a healthy America from a healthcare trend perspective. And it certainly is not leading to an America that's got its mental health in order. I mean, based on what we are seeing in terms of epidemic of loneliness, substance abuse, and grievance.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, if you were to fast forward a couple of years from now, and if we took some of your motto that we want to pay people in terms of more fair wages, do you see that more as a reality in 4 years from now, or do you see that as us still being kind of a world apart? And what's it going to take to actually get us there?
Well, I think people are organizing. I mean, I think that the raising the minimum wage has been on state ballots around the country, red and blue states, almost equally. It is won, I think, 21 out of 23 times.
Hmm.
A few years ago, California passed a law saying that the fast food workers should be paid at least $20 an hour. And there was all of this criticism that it would destroy the fast food industry in California. Net result, a couple of years later, 10,000 new fast food jobs. Because when you actually pay people a higher minimum wage, they spend it right back in their community. It's the essence of Keynesianism. So a little bit the way I approach the businesses in life, David, I really believe that the future is always going to be brighter,
Love
and
that.
the future is going to be owned by optimists,
Yeah.
because that's how you create possibility. You and I have both created businesses that no one thought should be around. And at times they were right, and we had to figure it out. And the way you do it is being a cold-eyed optimist. And so I'm a cold-eyed optimist. America, eventually gets it right, even through some twists and turns. So I'm going to put a bet that both businesses and governments and people will wake up, and we will have a higher minimum wage. We'll get closer to a living wage, through a combination of the state and federal action and inspiration from podcasts like yours.
And yours. Okay, well, I'm an optimist as well. And speaking of podcasts, as you know, a big fan of your podcast as well on Care Talk. And I love what you guys have done there. You've interviewed experts all over on mental health, access, healthcare, worker burnout, and behavioral health. What's the most important thing that you've learned about supporting mental health from your podcast?
I think that it's really the same thing I learned early on at Oxford that I pulled in from my time working for the Department of Social Services. That if you approach every human interaction in healthcare with the notion that no one comes into the healthcare system anything other than scared and vulnerable,
Hmm.
that you honor the dignity of that individual and their vulnerability, that it's amazing the connections you can make that then are essential for you to actually help heal them and grow yourself. That a lot of the mental health challenges or the disconnection of mental and physical in the healthcare system can be solved by individuals connecting with one another.
Hmm.
There was a recent study that people in coffee shops who interacted with each other and the barista actually had, a happier daily outlook than those that didn't. You kind of extend that to the best experiences in hospital, where whether it's a food attendant or a janitor or a nurse that touches your arm, looks you in the eye, gives you a sense that you're going to be all right, honoring the understanding that you're vulnerable, honoring where you are, and being optimistic. I think that in terms of the way we can solve one of the mental health challenges that you and I can act on right now are just remind people, the E.M. Forster line, only connect.
Yeah.
And that's something that a lot of people in healthcare don't do. Uh, in terms of personally, and the stress that I think about with the businesses and the teams I've worked with, it's to recognize that the battle rhythm of life is a rhythm. It can't be constantly always on. And so what I worry about in terms of executives and caregivers is those that sort of run hot all the time.
Mm.
And I think we do have to worry about, worker burnout, because the healthcare system will take as much as you want to give it and more. And that more can include your own ability to really bring your full self to work. And I think you got to honor the fact that you got to give people room for that. And we for example at CareCentrix ran many of our executives through Jim Lur's Human Performance Institute to
Sure.
teach them how to think about
Mm.
balancing intensity with recovery.
Mm.
So I guess the two things I think about are only connect and make room to recover.
I love that. I love that. We could all actually take a little bit more time to recover. Actually, Jack Rowe, we were talking about earlier, said that to me as part of the book Recharge here. He said, every once in a while, you just got to disconnect. You got to shift out of gear. And it's a constant reminder that it's really hard to kind of run at a certain level and expected to make all these decisions. And every once in a while, it's good to get out of gear.
I'm down with that.
So speaking of recharging as a leader, you've held a number of incredibly demanding positions, and we talked, and you actually talked about a little bit about how you transitioned quickly as into Walgreens. We completed a study here at Calm where we interviewed over 250 C-suite executives. And we found that most of them, this kind of goes into what you were just saying, are kind of running at about a 20% battery right now. And they're being asked to solve 100% of some of our hardest problems. How do you, what's your reaction to that survey and study that we did?
I guess I dig a little deeper. I think that the first thing is sometimes people, even in healthcare, their work or their way they approach their work is disconnected from their mission. And I found that if you can remind people of how important the stuff that you and I do is to other people's lives, it lifts people up. The second thing is, I don't know that every executive actually respects his team's need to balance that battle rhythm with recovery. And sometimes you need to teach people. I know that when I was at Oxford Health Plans and we were growing at 100% a year and we hit a wall and our stock dropped by 80% and everybody was getting investigated by all the departments we were working with because they're trying to figure out what went wrong. Um, I stepped back and realized, okay, I'm overweight. My father's close to outlifting me in the gym. I'm not making time for my kids, who were then quite young. And so I literally went on a exercise regime because I thought the one thing I can always control is my ability to exercise at daybreak. And I tried to make sure that I saw my kids at least once before 8:30 in the morning every morning. And
Mm,
that connection with my kids and that control over my body helped me kind of build a rhythm in an enormously 724 stressful period in my life. The other thing that I learned from that period, honestly, was how important my friends were, who didn't really care about
mm,
business and what was going on with Oxford Health Plans or
mm.
who was investigating what. And also, I reinforced to myself and to my team, we have to succeed because we've got hundreds of thousands of patients who rely on us, and they think we're the best alternative they have. And so let's make sure we understand that, but also make sure you're taking care of yourself, getting that rest and recovery, thinking about time just to kind of chill. You can sustain any level of productivity, but not endlessly.
That's right.
And I think that those were the lessons I was lucky to learn early on that I've integrated into my life and hopefully at times have helped teach others.
Yeah, that's great. I've used one as well to tell people that, on this 20% that we found from our survey, if you were an athlete, would you go out there and try to compete at 20%? If you were a coach, compete, watching over these athletes, do you think you could be your best at 20%? I think all of us kind of step back and say, of course not. We wouldn't want to see that. And so why do we as leaders sometimes feel that it's okay for us to be that way? And
But
so
it's amazing to me. I don't know whether you saw the most recent reviews of Indiana's football team. They're doing incredibly well,
yes,
and
they are.
one of the things that Harvard had a good year too, by the way. That the that doesn't always happen. What I loved is that he decided to only train as hard as he needed to, as opposed to burn people out during the week. And guess what? They come to the game rested, ready, and strong. He trains them just enough to get to the point where they can really play well, but no more. There's a lesson in there for a lot of corporate leaders about what they demand of themselves and of others that I think we should internalize.
That's right. And there's so many kind of old norms being questioned. That's a great one about like, practice every day really hard, but sometimes it's
And
like,
beat
okay,
each other up.
right.
Like,
One of them actually we talk about sometimes in the survey that came out as well was just about sleep and our old attitudes as CEO about sleep were
Oh
You would
man.
say
Oh
lack of
bad.
sleep was like a
Yeah.
badge of honor, right?
Let's just not talk about how little you and I slept when we were building our early careers. It's not, it would dishonor our new insights.
So, today, tell us how is your relationship, what is your relationship with sleep and how do you think about that and how has that progressed over your career?
Sleep and I are getting along much better. Thank you very much. My relationship, we've been close for many years, but there have been some periods of distance and we've worked through those. And now we are very close and we keep regular contact. When I was younger, it was a badge of honor to work through the night or to work more hours than anybody else. Or, and I had a little bit of I mean, I think all of us do, insecure overachievers, and the need to kind of impress upon yourself and others just how almost document through being exhausted how hard you're working. And look, that's just not again, we talked about, being using an athlete as a model of playing at your peak performance. You actually have to be completely rested and ready. And that's as true for corporate life as it is for sports. I think two things. It's super important for everyone to actually realize that it's probably the easiest and most important thing you can do to improve in general your health, not just how prepared you are for work, but it's really quite easy. And the second thing is to monitor it, because I think
Yeah.
monitoring helps, keep you accountable. But sleep and I are getting along really well right now. Thanks for asking.
Yeah, I think for myself, it's been interesting. It's been such a journey, like you say. I no longer focus on the quantity of sleep, John, per se, but it's really almost the quality of my sleep. And so, did I have a really good quality sleep? And what I mean by that is, I try really to not let the phone be the last thing I look at before I go to bed. And I try really hard for it to not be the first thing I look at when I wake up. And for a long time, I would tell you that I do that and then sleep, and then my quality just wasn't there because you're just kind of thinking constantly about the email that you sent or the email you're supposed to receive and what that may look like. And so once I was able to kind of create some space around that, my relationship too has been a lot healthier around sleep.
I find the same. I'm really a big have a great deal of just trying to find something that'll pull me in, like a novel, a mystery, a biography of someone who's sort of interesting. So you're moving away from the everyday and the last move before you crash.
That's right, because a lot of the CEOs we and people we talk to about leading then talk about, well, with this lack of sleep, then they feel drained. And then after feeling drained, it becomes a vicious cycle because you feel less present at work. And then when you feel less present at work, almost 48% now of these C-suite executives that we talk to are thinking about quitting, or maybe have already quit, and it's like a quiet quitting. And are they their best selves at these jobs? So there's something really to be said about almost taking a step back and thinking about, kind of we started the conversation around whole health and really trying to understand what that may mean from a mental and physical perspective for all of us, not just C-suite individuals.
Well, and to shamelessly put in a plug for Calm, I do find that meditation for me, yeah, I read a book by the guy named Thich Nhat Hanh
Yeah.
many years ago that was really transformational. Another one by a guy named Maswaran, but probably the most powerful book I read was about, stress and meditation by Herbert Benson. That tied together sort of the Eastern insights with the Western notion that one of the biggest killers of heart disease is to meditate, and
Yes.
and
Yes.
then it's simple, but it also is not a bad way to prepare yourself to go to sleep. And I think it's both good for stress relief, but it also helps, I think, ease you into the night. And I actually do care about the quantity as well as the quality. Frankly, I like sleeping a lot when I can figure it out. So you may be a sports sleeper, David, but I'm a quality and a quantity sleeper.
I love that. I love that. Before we wrap, I always like to end every episode by asking a couple last questions. So I've got three last ones for you. And I don't call it a speed round because it never ends up being a speed round. Um, what's something about you, John, that might surprise people?
I think that my favorite one is that I trained with the 82nd and Airborne and the Green Berets, as well as worked with the homeless. That usually confuses everyone.
That would confuse. Yes, I am confused as well. That's awesome. All right. So, second one. You inspire so many people, and including myself. And so, who
Well, thank you.
inspires you?
Well, I actually carry two wonderful sign things in my offices wherever I am, and they're to for inspiration. One is Ernest Shackleton, who very famously was searching for the South Pole, and his boat cratered, and he had a very difficult path of survival, but he brought all of his team out alive through incredible challenges. And it's a reminder that the team's the most important thing, and the team should not just hopefully in companies not just be alive but thrive. And the second is a sign note from Martin Luther King. And I think his life is a great inspiration and reminder that from darkness you can find light, and anything is possible if you can imagine it and draw people towards that vision and organizing them to achieve it.
That's beautiful. I love that. And finally, what is your favorite way to recharge?
It's somewhere between sports and hanging out with friends. And so I guess it would be going for a hike with friends, or playing sports with friends, and my wife. It always makes my day to be probably hiking with my wife and friends would probably be the best way I could think of recharging.
I love that. I wasn't sure if you were going to talk about you're in that pickleball craze now. Are you in the
Nah, that's just a great source of orthopedic surgeons' new volume. For whatever reason, I put that up with mahjong and other things that might date one. So I'm more fighting fiercely with the sports like that that I are currently lifting weights and cycling and
I love
hiking
that.
and that kind of stuff.
I love that. I will tell you, I'm going to put a fourth in here because we've had a number of guests on. They've been great. You're awesome. But I got to tell you right now, I am really enamored with your microphone. I think you've got a great microphone. I now know I need a new microphone here. My
You've got
microphone
microphone,
feels
you've got mic envy.
I got Mike Envy. This feels very inadequate. So I need a new
We'll get you a
microphone.
reference on the mic.
Well, I got to tell you, John, and to everyone that is listening, I took a ton of notes here, and I've known John for quite some time because I continue to learn so much from him in this
I got you.
conversation. And if you have two, I would ask all of you to please like this episode and share this episode with your family and friends. John, I'm so glad that you were able to join me on this episode of Recharge. And I can't tell you how much I appreciated you just sharing your incredible perspectives, whether it was on healthcare, your personal perspectives, the American workplace. Just thank you for everything that you do and for everything that you continue to do.
I treasure your friendship, David, and it's an honor to be on this podcast. But if you'd like another one, you should think about coming to listen to us at Care Talk.
I, I
As David was one of our honored guests, this is just really a privilege. And I'm also in awe of what you've accomplished at COM and with this podcast to remind people of the importance of recovery and calm in their lives. And so, congratulations.
Thank you. And lastly, I would tell people please continue to hit that subscribe button and also buy John's book. I'm just going to just tell it to you directly. I really enjoyed reading it. I actually hope you all will enjoy it as well. It's called Pay the People. You can find it on Amazon. And thank you all for listening. And I'll see you on the next episode of Recharge.